The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I was just reviewing my notes to get people up to speed on where the Boston Marathon bombing investigation was and was not, and we just learned literally 13 minutes before we went on the air, CNN breaking news update, that an arrest has been made in the Boston bombing investigation based on 2 videos showing images of the suspect, according to a federal law enforcement source who told CNN's Fran Townsend. We are waiting for more information about this. The initial reports were simply that a suspect had been identified in part because of video from a surveillance camera, a security camera, at a Lord & Taylor in Boston, Lewis, of course, the department store. And now we are being told by CNN that there has been an arrest in the case. Incredible, if this is true, and it appears to be, how quickly we went from wanting leads to having someone in custody. We don't know anything about the details at this point.
Right. Well, I mean, since those bags or whatever the bombs were in were placed during the event.
Right.
I mean, you've got the people who have the good sense to scour every video camera in every store,
That's
every
right.
part of the city, everything.
So to back up, for people who may not have known, we had a determination made by investigators that the black nylon bags, which contained what were eventually determined to be pressure cookers with gunpowder and some combinations of nails and ball bearings and other pieces of metal that would serve as shrapnel projectiles, which did a lot of damage, were not placed at the time that the Boston Marathon began, which led them to believe, okay, the individual or individuals we're looking for, we're here, we're at the finish line at some point within these few hours. Then you say, okay, let's focus on any camera in the area that may have spotted somebody that was walking by. Let's I would assume, investigate, has anybody purchased multiple pressure cookers? Were they dumb enough not to purchase the pressure cookers individually and as far from Boston as possible so as to not raise any eyebrows? All of those lines now leading to what we are told is an arrest in the case.
Right. Fascinating.
Natan, what do you know about a press conference? When would we know more about this?
Well, it seems like the FBI is going to hold a conference at 5 p.m. Eastern, and I don't know if we'll be able to know, or even then, if we'll be able to know this person's name and have a picture of them and see who the person is.
Once we know more, Lewis, right now we are at a point where we are told that an arrest has been made. We don't yet know, is this an individual? Is this somebody who is part of a broader, potentially international terrorist group? Depending on what the details are about the person, and we know we're going to know them soon, right? This is just, we've got a few hours now, potentially, maybe more, to wait. The direction of the discussion around public events and terrorism and bombs will be drastically different based on the characteristics of the perpetrator here, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, if it's your standard white guy, disturbed, homegrown terrorist,
you're going to see one narrative.
You're going to see one narrative. You're going to see Fox saying this is a lone wolf incident. You're going to have us saying this is part of a long string of domestic, probably right-wing terrorist attacks. And if it's someone who's not white, well,
we know what happens.
Yeah, we know.
We have hearings specifically targeted at that group of people based on skin color and all those things. And there's a lot of in between also, right, Natan? I mean, when it comes to policy, when it comes to media coverage, I mean, all of these things will differ, even though we know what the event was right now, will differ based on the characteristics of the perpetrator.
Yeah, I mean, also just in terms of what do we do about this? How do we prevent this from happening? It's totally different if it's a homegrown terrorist that has the same sort of profile as a lot of the mass shooters, young white males, versus sort of an international terrorist group where people start to say, well, what do we need to do in terms of military action in other countries to prevent this from happening? So it's a completely different scenario.
Absolutely. We're going to keep posted on this. Expect YouTube updates later today. A few things to get you up to speed on. Secret Service has reported that a suspicious letter, a poisoned letter, potentially poisoned letter, pending some final test, has been mailed to President Obama. The U.S. Secret Service intercepted the letter addressed to President Obama, and it contained what was initially described as a suspicious substance. Now, in addition to this, a letter that appears to have been laced with ricin was postmarked from Memphis and sent to Republican Senator from Mississippi Roger Wicker's office, according to ABC News. So police do say they have a suspect in mind here as they try to figure out who it is that sent the letter to Senator Wicker, to President Obama. They know of someone who regularly writes a lot of letters to members of Congress, and that there is a very focused investigation there, and that both letters, the one sent to President Obama, is very similar to the one sent to Republican Senator Roger Wicker. That's happening, and simultaneously today we had a suspicious package alert at the Senate office building. There was a package there being investigated. No connection is being intimated with the Boston Marathon shootings, but certainly speculation about whether what took place on Monday may simply be influencing people to try to get involved, right? Not in specific or identifiable similar ways, I guess is what I'm looking at. But sometimes when this happens, and we've talked about this when it came to Sandy Hook, that the coverage of it, the almost anti-hero coverage in many cases, we don't yet know the details of the Boston Marathon suspect, can cause people to say, I need attention. What can I do?
Yeah, the coverage can be dangerous, and it's probably going to get worse now that they have the person. I mean, if it's one thing if you've got someone who ends up killing themselves, but when it's someone who survives the incident, I mean, to a lot of people, they probably look like a deity, you know?
All of the letters that go to members of the Senate and to President Obama are opened, tested, and sorted at an off-site facility that applies to both the White House and the Capitol, and that's where these were intercepted. So if nothing else, we know that system seems to at least be in place and functioning to some extent.
Right. I would imagine any letter specifically addressed to the President of the United States goes through more
rigorous screening.
More screening than your average letter. It's pretty stupid to think that you can actually just send a letter in your mail and get it directly to the president.
Right. American conservative political activist Alan Keyes, he is a guy whose profile has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. He's a former diplomat. He's a perennial candidate for some kind of office. He holds a doctoral. He holds a doctorate from Harvard University, and he started in the Foreign Service in 1979. He is also a guy who might be a little kooky. He had a couple clips where he made a number of different claims. One is that gay marriage leads to the murder of the masses. Let's take a listen to Alan Keyes coming out of the woodwork.
Ages of human oppression, which America was founded to remove humanity from, and it is the whole point of the push for homosexual marriage and homosexual rights. The aim is not compassion for homosexuals, respect for homosexuals, and all of this. The aim in the minds of these hard-headed, calculating, leftist, communist totalitarians is to destroy the family and to establish the notion that once you have seized power, there is no limit whatsoever to what you can do. And if you want to tolerate abuses, then those abuses can be imposed upon the people. Once you establish that, the abuses are not going to be confined to egregious outrages like this. Those abuses are going to be committed against the whole society, and they will, in the end, include the murder of the masses as occurred.
So there it is. Alan Keyes making the connection. It's a very tenuous connection, not based on the real world in any way, but that gay marriage would lead to communism, and it would open up the door to the murder of the masses. He also says that Satan is using gay people on television to destroy America. Now, how does that happen? I'm trying to think. Gay people on TV, the country's destroyed. I'm not making the connection, but maybe he can make it for me.
Mind that the devil's not playing. He's deadly serious about the destruction of America's character, spiritual nature, and the foundations of that way of life which stood against the devilish work in the 20th century and defeated it soundly again and again. I think we're on the shore.
Okay.
But we need to keep in
I'm gonna
mind,
skip forward a little bit.
and it's not the way some people think, money and the collapse of the economy, that's all a consequence of the destruction of the moral understanding and moral character that made the regime possible in the first place and that has sustained our constitutional self-government since it was founded. And all that's being destroyed. And a key vehicle for doing that is what you might call the popular culture of entertainment. Music, television shows, movies. I've noticed, for instance, that every form of entertainment now is being programmed to promote the acceptance of homosexuality.
There it is. So evaluate the theory, Lewis, that Alan Keyes is putting together, which is gay marriage. Gays on TV are being used to destroy the fabric of the country, and gay marriage is going to lead to communism, and all of a sudden the masses will be murdered because of gay marriage.
I hate to say it, but it sounds like this guy could be suffering from dementia.
Honestly, Natan, these are the rantings of a madman.
Yeah, one of the things that I just find notable about all of these anti-gay guys who talk about, gay marriage destroying America is that they don't compare it to any other country. You would think that if gay marriage was going to destroy a democracy, a representative republic, and destroy the whole fabric of society, that it would start to happen in other countries. But
Right.
we have lots of other countries that have legalized gay marriage, and there's no sign in any of them, and no sign in any U.S. state that has already had it been legal for several years.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
anything's
Wouldn't
happened.
Massachusetts by now have fallen off into the Atlantic Ocean?
Correct.
You would, these are the types of people who never actually pay attention to anything important. And without doing an ounce of research, they would probably say that in these other countries, well, things have already deteriorated and that they're horrible places to live.
Right.
Whereas we know that is not the case.
It's certainly not the case.
Yeah.
The Montana House has endorsed a measure to decriminalize gay sex. The Montana House voted decisively to repeal the Montana law, which makes gay sex a crime. And this now puts the bill one step away from the governor's desk. It is 2013, by the way. I just want to mention that. This is not, you would think that this was a headline from, I don't know, not 2013, but it's not. And there was a half hour of debate, and the final vote was 64 to 36 to repeal, to decriminalize gay sex, Senate Bill 107. It didn't really pass by that much, only by 2 to 1. More than a third of the voters thought, you know what, it should be illegal to have sex with someone of the same gender as you. That's where they're at. So is this progress, or is the fact that 36 people thought that should still be the case show us how backwards things are?
Well, we know things are backwards in a lot of places, but I guess at least this is something somewhat good.
Here's the really funny thing about this. There's a 1997 decision from the Montana Supreme Court which had already declared unconstitutional the criminalizing of gay sex, and as a result, Montana has not enforced it, right? Prosecutors have not prosecuted anybody for gay sex. So it's already been determined to be unconstitutional, but they've been trying to repeal the law just to get it off the books, and that hasn't worked.
Right.
Now it finally has. But remember, 36 members of the House, mostly small government conservatives, voted for an unconstitutional law. And when I say unconstitutional, I don't mean, in my opinion, unconstitutional. The Montana Supreme Court has said this is unconstitutional.
A law that they can't even legally enforce.
It's a law they can't legally enforce. They're still not okay with decriminalizing gay sex. I thought they were obsessed with the Constitution, Ton.
Yeah, I thought so too. I think what's funny about this is that if you actually met some of those 36 reps that voted against repealing this, you would probably be surprised that they're not all just like crazy nutballs who say crazy things about homosexuality. Some of them are probably just like, small town folk. They're like, yeah, it's just what the Lord says. I have nothing against anybody. It just, you would get that in addition to the crazy nutballs who are very bigoted.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there
put.
you go. Montana coming to the 1950s, I guess. But they're being dragged kicking and screaming, I must say.
Putting up, fighting the good fight.
Yeah, they're really putting up quite a fight. Under protest, they have decriminalized gay sex to correspond with the Constitution. Ted Nugent, has anybody realized that we've hit the April 12th anniversary? April 12th, 2012, Ted Nugent saying he will be dead or in jail within a year if President Obama is reelected. The deadline has come and gone, and I am not aware of Ted Nugent being in jail, nor am I aware of him having died. So what's going on? Is Ted going to let a bunch of liberals call him a liar? I'm not sure what the end game is with his timeline.
Well, he lied. I mean, he passed the deadline. If he goes to jail or dies now, it doesn't really count. He said April 12th.
Right.
Imagine that. Ted Nugent's full of crap. Who knew?
Yeah, hard to believe that it didn't happen, huh?
Yeah. Big surprise.
Our Indiegogo campaign has passed the $8,000 mark. If you're not up to speed on this, we started an Indiegogo campaign at the beginning of the month. We're trying to raise $30,000 to upgrade the entire David Pakman Show broadcast to high definition. Every piece of equipment we need is outlined on our Indiegogo page. How do you find the Indiegogo page? It's very easy. You go to our website, davidpakman.com, and at the top of the website, if we can get that image up for people, you'll see that there is a bright green banner. And the bright green banner, you click it, it takes you to the Indiegogo campaign. You can check out all the perks that are available for contributing. And I have a big announcement to make. I had 10 or 15 people say, you know, I understand I can contribute any amount, even if it's $10 or $15, but I would really like to have some kind of a perk for doing that. I think you could do something. What about bumper stickers? So at the request, Lewis, at the request of our audience, I made a phone call to our local print shop. We are supporting small business. I sent them our logo. They've printed up some great bumper stickers for us, and effective immediately, anybody who donates, we're going to have it set up at the $10, $25, and $50 levels. You will get a David Pakman Show bumper sticker. We will send it to you after the campaign ends because we want to be very clear, Lewis. We want to encourage donations of any amount, so we have established some great perks now, starting at the $10 level. I think it is time for people to get on and make a contribution.
You got to love the perks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lewis loves perks. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We will talk about a professor arrested for swearing. Just pretty calmly swearing, I must say, also, not any kind of tirade. And we will talk about Marco Rubio admitting he just didn't read that gun control bill he opposed. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
If you do any shopping at all on Amazon.com, please go to our website, davidpakman.com. On the right side of the website, there's a banner which takes you to the Amazon website. If you click that before you shop, you won't see anything different. But after you check out, Amazon will take your purchase and send the David Pakman Show a kickback of 7%. You can bookmark that link, use it whenever you shop, and you'll be supporting the David Pakman Show with every purchase you make.
It's as close as you can get to actually kicking Dave Pakman.
Kind of is.
Yeah.
You can also become a David Pakman Show member, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. I know liberals think they're so cool with their statistics and math, but conservatives do have numerology. Find out more about how to use numbers without liberal bias at liberalbias.com. I want to say hi and thank you to a new David Pakman Show member today, Nicholas Van Duvendijk. Nicholas, thank you very much for becoming a David Pakman Show member. Your membership means a lot, Lewis. And as you know, the show is really supported and funded by members.
Yes, that is the vast majority of how we conduct our business here.
The show is supported that way, and that's it's incredible. It's incredible that people, just by signing up for a subscription, have created and are responsible for a program that's on 160 radio and TV stations, as well as on DirecTV, Dish Network, and the internet, right? You wouldn't think that, hey, I'm just going to subscribe to this, and now we have this huge thing.
It's kind of a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So thank you. Interesting story here. College professor Laura Curry from University of Buffalo has been arrested for swearing at a pro-life display. There was a, I don't actually even want to call it that. There was an anti-abortion display with graphic medical images and all sorts of stuff. You know the type of thing, Lewis. We know the type of people that put this together.
Oh, yeah.
And she didn't like it. And she was swearing. She wasn't very agitated. She was just there swearing. Police officers told her to stop swearing, and that kind of made her more irritated. And she ended up getting arrested, and she really wasn't being disorderly. She was just saying, why is my swearing a big deal? There's really graphic images right here. That's offensive. Let's take a look at what happened.
Well, you have an opinion about my language. So my tenor or my velocity, my volume is also profane. I am not being disorderly. That is disorderly. That is disorderly. No, I'm not done. That's disorderly. And I can speak, and that's my First Amendment right. I am civil. I am civil. My feelings are very strong. I believe that is should, and
So there's a
that is
couple of police officers
violence.
standing around her,
That's
and they're having a
profane.
discussion.
That is violence.
And she was told not to
That
swear.
isn't. I am carrying on. I can swear because that's part of my vocabulary and that's part of my First Amendment right. Where does it say that I cannot use the word in public? Where does it say that? What law says that? Amen. I agree. But that isn't profane.
So now he's saying that they're saying you're being profane, and she's saying, listen, the incredibly graphic anti-abortion display is what's profane. And then as things advance, she ends up getting cuffed and then asks for her class to be notified that she got arrested.
That's swearing. That is swearing. I'm making my position clear. That is profane. That image is profane.
So now that she swore again, she gets arrested. She's getting cuffed
That
now.
image is profane. Would you let my class know that I'm under arrest at 1 o'clock? Thank you.
All right, so please let my 1 o'clock know that I am under arrest. I have to say that I understand that she, if she was harassing or bullying students at the display, arrest her. If she is just, that level of rowdiness does not correlate to an arrest to me in any way.
No, but if you are an officer on the scene and you're very bored, you might decide that this is something to do. I don't know.
No one can stop the Westboro Baptist Church from picketing funerals and saying whatever they want. This woman is arrested for saying the F word, and to be honest, pretty calmly, given that she was being, bugged by the police officers quite a bit there. It's just unbelievable. It doesn't make any sense to me, Natan.
Yeah, it seemed like maybe she wanted to get arrested. I mean, it seems like it's a good way of getting the word out. I mean, she's sort of forcing people to discuss this on campus and elsewhere. I mean, we're talking about it here, whether what she's doing is more or less profane or equally profane to the ridiculous setup they have there.
But it's like, take the display down if you're here to do anything that's going to improve the situation. Pretty disturbing stuff. New polls about background checks on guns. Gun background checks now are more popular than apple pie, kittens, and baseball. As many as 90% of Americans favor full gun background checks. In some polls, it is a little lower in the high 80s, mid 80s, but we know that it is very, very popular. Conversely, only 81% of Americans have a favorable opinion of apple pie. And that's pretty widely available, Lewis, I must say.
That's shocking.
It is. 76% of Americans have a favorable opinion of kittens, which is basically the reason the internet exists. Like, have you ever been to Reddit?
That's even more shocking. Only 76%.
71% of Americans favor child labor laws, but 90% favor full background checks for gun purchases. And only 67% of Americans favor America's pastime, baseball. But almost 90% of Americans say we should have full background checks to purchase a gun. You would think it's a big controversy over background checks, right? Because there's
From
a lot
everything we hear, yeah.
a lot of discussion. The NRA says it would just punish the good people, but even most of the NRA membership thinks we should have full background checks. You got to go to the source here and think critically when you're seeing fake controversy and purported balance on corporate media. Speaking of gun legislation, Florida Republican Marco Rubio admits that he hasn't even read the gun control bill that he opposes. How does he know to oppose it? Let's try to figure that out. Here he is on Fox News Sunday.
A couple of minutes left, and I want to try to get to some other issues. Let's do a lightning round. Quick questions, quick answers. You voted this week to filibuster the gun bill. Does that mean that you will vote against the Manchin-Toomey compromise to expand background checks when that comes up this week?
Well, to be fair, I haven't read it in its totality, but I can tell you this. I am very skeptical of any plan that deals with the Second Amendment because invariably these gun laws end up impeding on the rights of people to bear arms who are law-abiding and do nothing to keep criminals from buying them. Criminals don't care what the law is.
Interesting. That sounds exactly like the NRA talking point. So let's see.
It's also demonstrably false.
Which is, yeah. So let's take it for a step at a time here. He hasn't actually read it, but whenever there's legislation related to the Second Amendment, he doesn't like that. That he doesn't like. He hasn't read the bill, though. He will vote against it. What are taxpayers paying Marco Rubio to do, right? I mean, if you're going to oppose bills in a partisan and haphazard way, at least read them to make it appear a little bit less like you're just pandering.
I mean, what they pay him to state talking points.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
He's pandering to the people that will fund his campaign. And instead of actually talking about the reality of the bill, he was just going up there and regurgitating NRA talking points. And maybe that's who's funding his next campaign. Maybe that's why he's doing it, right? I think that, we hear about most members of Congress don't read many of the bills. This isn't unique. Well, if you're going on all 5 Sunday morning talk shows specifically to talk about that bill, maybe it makes sense to read that one. Fine, don't read the other bills, but at least read the one you're going to be on 5 national media outlets talking about. Is that an unreasonable request?
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I think so too. Justin Bieber was in Amsterdam, and are you a believer, Louis?
No, I don't normally preach violence, but I'd like to beat the hell out of Justin Bieber.
Why?
It just the Scientology stuff, his attitude.
Oh, I had no idea he was a Scientologist.
His performances, his hair.
Can you
the
fact
things he
check
says.
that while I talk about this? I didn't know anything about the Scientology with Justin Bieber.
Okay.
See if you can fact check that. In the meantime, Justin Bieber was on break from his European tour. He was in Amsterdam. He said, you know what, I'm going to stop by the Anne Frank house and kind of reflect on the legacy of the Holocaust. And I thought, wow, I mean, maybe somebody told him that you should do this because he's been having all sorts of PR trouble, but that actually is at least somewhat interesting that he seems to care about seeing what happened there. And he left a little entry in the museum guest book where you could just kind of write a message. And he said, truly inspiring to be able to come here. Anne was a great girl. Hopefully she would have been a belieber. And belieber is the term used for Justin Bieber's fans. They're beliebers.
Please don't say that word again ever.
I wasn't sure if the reports of this were satire or some kind of Onion article, but apparently it's real. That's what he wrote. Anne was a great girl. Hopefully she would have been a belieber. Now in the guest book at the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam.
Okay, I guess he's not I guess the reports were false that he converted to Scientology.
No, I thought that he comes from a very Christian family. Is my understanding. In
All
any
right.
case, I don't
Still,
really.
everything about him irks me, and this is just the cherry on top.
Is this just, you find this disrespectful or just ignorant?
It's just ignorant. I mean, he what he saw there, what he came out with after that is, oh, I hope she would have been a Justin Bieber fan.
It is. Natan, what was your reaction when you heard about this?
I mean, if you look at this guy's picture and the picture behind you, this is like kind of the ideal picture of him. He seems to have 2 tablespoons too much self-esteem. He seems to be one of these kids that since the time that he was born, his parents are telling him he's very, very special.
Well, it seems
And
that he is,
in a
right?
way.
I mean, look at his career.
Just not in the way his parents wanted.
He's a freak.
All right. So this angering a lot of people, and we'll just leave it at that. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Check out David Pakman Show gear made from 100% recycled materials at davidpakman.com/gear. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm David Pakman in Denver, Colorado at the National Conference for Media Reform. I'm here with Jean-Philippe Tremblay, Director of Shadows of Liberty. 6 years to produce, censorship, corporate control of media. What was the impetus for working on this film?
Well, we wanted to make a film with Dog Factory and the Bertha Foundation about what matters most to people. The goal of our independent media organization is to investigate and research subjects that are most important to people, to the mass population. And during our research, we came upon a book by an amazing American journalist. His name is Ben Begdikian. He wrote a book entitled The New Media Monopoly. And the New Media Monopoly looks at American media and says that 5 corporations control most of the media in the United States and around the world. So by looking at this, it was clear to us that media is the most important subject for for everyone, because no matter what you're interested about, whether it's environment or politics or business or culture, we learn about that through the media. So it's important to really know where the media comes from, that most of it is controlled by these conglomerates, and their bottom line is profit. So what we get is a lot of stories, a lot of news stories that are full of propaganda, lies, distortion, and that's what we've investigated in the film.
So I think a lot of people understand this, or they've at least heard about this idea that these 5 big corporations control most media. But for people who aren't making the connection directly to what is the downside, how is the average media consumer negatively affected by that? Talk about that a little bit. In other words, how is that bad?
Well, the thing is that we live in a democracy, and no matter what you want to call the societies we live in, what's really important for us to live our lives is to get information about where we live, information about how we can become educated, make choices in our lives. We have to make a living. So information is really the pillar of any society, especially a democratic society. Here in the United States, democracy was based upon journalism, the right to information, the freedom to information. And so when we understand that information is the most important thing in our lives, it's important for us to get that right information. And when it's filtered through corporations or through conglomerates whose main interest is profit, and who have other interests as well. It's not only the media that or news organizations that they own and run. Some of these conglomerates have other business interests, like defense contracts, or they make nuclear energy, or they make weaponry. So we have to know this, and that's the problem, is that when information is filtered through these corporations, we don't actually get the real truth to stories, and we need to get down to the truth, because that's the most important thing. That's how we can make proper decisions about who we vote for in elections.
And I think a lot of times also it's not as overt. In other words, as a casual consumer of media, one might not realize, I remember when the Deepwater Horizon oil spill happened, and within days, right after Wolf Blitzer says, we'll take a break with more information about Deepwater Horizon after this, then a BP commercial comes on. That was kind of, for a lot of people, they really saw it, right? It was a very clear connection of the problem. But throughout the year, on an ongoing basis, I don't think people necessarily realize those conflicts of interest when they just casually consume news.
You're absolutely right, and I guess that's part of the reason why we wanted to make the film, was really to bring awareness to how deep the problem is, and how much control these corporations have. And exactly, it's not black and white anymore. I mean, we look at dictatorships around the world and throughout history. It used to be black and white. We knew that the person in power was a dictator, controlled all the newspapers, and the citizens living within that dictatorship knew that.
Right.
It was a very black and white kind of decision they had to make. Whereas now, the propaganda through these corporations has become so sophisticated that it's very hard for us to notice. And if you watch our film Shadows of Liberty, you can see to the extent how far these corporations go to make up their stories, and to also follow government lines, official sources, these kinds of things that a lot of the time leads us to more war, leads us to more corruption. We follow this in the film by looking at journalists who are trying to report the truth out of stories, stories out of wars that are happening around the world, corporations running businesses around the world. And we see that when these journalists report on power, they're stopped to do their reporting, and they're brushed aside, and they're done by these very extremely powerful institutions, such as the American government and the corporations that support it.
The film is Shadows of Liberty. Jean-Philippe Tremblay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm glad you're with us. I also want to say hi to everybody who is watching us through the Too Informed to Vote Republican Facebook page and the I Love It When I Wake Up in the Morning and Barack Obama is President Facebook page. Check out both of those. Update on our first story today. What was initially reported as a suspect in the Boston Marathon bombing case being identified and arrested has now been pulled back, as often is the case. And now we know only that the suspect has been identified. We are expecting an FBI press conference in the next couple of hours, but no arrests have been made. That is the latest news. And it's a very fluid situation. It's not that common that we actually have live news breaking as we're on the show, but we're keeping up with it as best we can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of not shocked there were some false reports of arrests, but everyone's trying to get, the word out there and get all the views and get all the attention.
And the question would be, soon, presumably, if they don't have an arrest, will they release images to help people track down the person, unless they already know where that person is and they want to kind of, not release that information. We will follow it. A disturbing new report finds that U.S. hospitals actually make more profit when surgery goes wrong in most cases, and the exceptions are pretty interesting. I'll tell you about this. Ross Story had a good write-up about this, and the study author Sunil Epan says that we found clear evidence that reducing harm and improving quality is perversely penalized in our current healthcare system. He's the chief medical officer of Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary. There's about $400 billion a year spent on surgery in the United States, and privately insured patients with complications provided hospital with 330% higher profit margin than those whose surgeries went smoothly, the study published in the Journal of American Medical Association found. Patients whose bills are paid via Medicare, which is, of course, a government insurance plan for elderly and disabled, produce 190% higher profit margin when complications arise following surgery. This is very interesting on a number of levels. Level number one, you're not really rewarding hospitals for quality. You're rewarding them for doing the biggest number of things. The more tests, procedures, and line items that they do, the more that they make. We need a system that creates an incentive to treat closest to the standard with low complications. The system right now, it doesn't make doctors try to mess surgeries up, but we have a system at the organizational level that doesn't really incentivize getting it right the first time, and that's it.
Right, pretty shocking.
It is. And also interesting is that those patients who were part of Medicare, when they had complications, the profit margins did not rise as high as did those who have private insurance, suggesting, at least to some extent, that there is something to be said about government-run healthcare and keeping exorbitant or additional extraneous costs down. But that's kind of a second thing. The big thing is that you shouldn't have more profit because you messed something up. Now, if there are complications that are not due to surgical error, right? That's one thing versus complications that are actually a mistake that was made. There probably has to be some distinction made, but broadly speaking, the system of just profit for doing things is not going to keep people healthy.
Right. You can look at a lot of the industries in this country. I mean, the government has never really provided any incentive to do things cleanly, to do things safely. It's quite the opposite, really.
That's exactly right. It's almost inverse incentives compared to what the public health incentives should be.
Right.
Another medical story, which I found pretty disturbing, the same chemotherapy treatment that costs $70,000 in the U.S. costs $2,500 in India. The Atlantic had a write-up about this, and they talked about Gleevec. Gleevec is a leukemia drug. It costs $70,000 for a year's course of treatment in the U.S. In India, it costs $2,500 for that same course of treatment. Now, what's going on behind this? You probably have an idea. Gleevec is under patent in the U.S., but not in India. Accordingly, Novartis, its Swiss-based manufacturer, can prevent competitors from making and selling lower-cost versions of the drug in the U.S., but they are not able to do that in India. So again, same company. This is not about the company. This is about the legal system in the country. The Indian system did not allow that, whereas the U.S. system does.
Right, and we've talked about. I mean, this is a two-part story, right? One of these parts is the U.S. patent system,
right,
which we've talked about before, and I think we both believe should probably just be discarded.
It should be changed at least. But to be completely clear, India had granted a patent on Gleevec. The problem is that now, as the patent was about to expire, Novartis filed for an extension saying that they had made some changes to the drug, and that's a way to get an extension on the patent by saying we've changed enough that it's noticeably different. And India rejected that.
Right.
And this is a huge issue for this. India is not alone in this. Indonesia has put a compulsory license for treatment of liver cancer causing hepatitis C and medications for a number of different conditions. So this is happening around the world. We're going to have more of this because cancer rates are increasing in developing countries, in part because people are living longer. Access to effective cancer treatment is limited in those countries, and this is going to be an issue. And we really have to think about, when we talk about patents, the government created a legal and economic framework where the drug could be researched. Roads, water, a lot of other shared resources were used and contributed to the development of those medications. So is it really fair for the company that gets over the finish line first, using all of those shared resources, to have a monopoly that leads to people not having access to drugs that they need?
I don't think it is fair. And of course, people will argue that all that research and development will basically go down the drain if the patent system doesn't allow for companies to do this. But perhaps this would force companies to cooperate with each other and maybe, I don't know,
develop things faster.
Stabilize the market a bit, develop things faster. It'd be better for the community.
There are huge problems with this system. Let's go to your voicemail. Voicemail line is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail about money being speech. Take a listen to this.
David, this is Ray from San Diego. If money is speech, then speech is money. Why can we not pay for our purchases with speech? Example, the cashier at a store says, that will be $2.89. We simply say $2.89 and ask for a receipt.
It's a pretty good point, right? I mean, he's taking into consideration that basic algebraic principle of symmetry. If A equals B, B equals A, right? That's what he's getting at there. It's an interesting question. I like it. I like your line of reasoning.
It's interesting to think about. Unfortunately, it's a one-way street.
Yeah, try that and walk out of a grocery store just by having said that. And here's another voicemail about the various wars some claim President Obama is waging and the lack of consistency in those wars.
Hey, David P. Justin from Indiana. Just watched your social media clip about Obama's war on black Americans, and I'm getting confused. Is this war on white Americans or black Americans? How come he's not waging a war on the Latinos, or is he? But you never hear the right saying that he's waging a war on Native Americans or Asian Americans, but he's definitely waging a war on Muslim Americans or Middle Eastern Indian Americans, however you want to frame that. But I'm just confused.
Yeah, it is confusing, right? On one hand, Obama hates white people and is doing everything for black people. On the other hand,
he hates black people.
On the other hand, he's waging a war against black people. And then, of course, he is Native American and Muslim and Indonesian, so it would be weird for him to wage wars against those people. It's not really clear who President Obama is, but we can be assured that he's waging any number of wars against any number of groups of people.
If there's a war to be had, he's in on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever wars are possible, President Obama is involved in them. Our Indiegogo campaign, we need your support. DavidPakman.com. Click on the bright green banner at the top of the page. We've just added bumper stickers, and this is huge, Lewis. We've gotten these produced exclusively because people said, I would actually contribute if you had a $10 level and you had a bumper sticker. So we've done it. Hey, it's people voting with their emails. It's incredible stuff, Lewis. That's it for today. DavidPakman.com. We'll see you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.